Okay. Hello everyone. Today I will talk about the NTLM Relay attack service of Exchange server. I will show you how I can take over arbitrary Exchange mailbox and even achieve RCE on Exchange servers with NTLM Relay. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Tianze Ding. I'm from Tencent Security Xuanwu Lab. My research is focusing on Active Directory security, cloud security, and web security. This is not the first time I stand on stage of HITB. As a former still player, my team got first runner-up in HITB CTF final in 2018. I will discuss these vulnerabilities in this talk. Some of these could lead to arbitrary mailbox takeover, while some more critical ones can lead to remote code execution on Exchange servers, and even privilege escalation to domain admin. Before diving into the technical details, let me clarify something. Some of these vulnerabilities in this talk were also found independently by Orange, named Proxy Relay. We all found this attack service independently. He also mentioned me in his blog, so I also list him here as a co-author. Let's begin our talk. Let's talk about NTLM Relay first. The NTLM Relay attack is a well-known attack method that has been around for many years. I think most of you are very familiar with it. It's quite old, but still popular in nowadays attacks. As a main middle attack, the attacker needs to intercept NTLM authentication attempts sent by the victim and relay the NTLM message to the attacked target. And finally, log into the attacked target with the victim's identity. Then the attacker can do anything the victim can do in the attacked target. But one important thing in this process is the attacker needs to trick or coerce the victim to authenticate to his malicious server. There are many well-known RPC APIs can coerce remote machine accounts to authenticate to any attack-controlled targets without victim interaction. The most famous RPCs are printbug used by the print service and the PT potent used by the EFS service. Both of them are enabled by default in Windows machines, and any low-privileged domain account can call these APIs remotely. And with the file path related parameters set to the attacker-controlled UNC path, for example, the file name in the EFS RPC open file row API, the remote machine account will send NTLM authentication messages to the attacked host in the UNC path. And then the attacker can use the machine account to perform further NTLM relay attacks. A success NTLM relay attack also needs to meet some conditions. First part is authentication. The related credentials need to be considered valid by the attacked target. The second part is the related credentials need to have special privileges on the attacked target to perform attacks. For example, local administration privileges. A low-privileged domain user or machine account cannot do much harm in general. There are also some mitigations we need to take into consider to perform a successful NTLM relay attack, like NTLM reflection protection, assembly signing, or depth signing, and EPA. And the EPA has two parts. The chain binding provides protection for SSL communication by calculating a signature of the SSL certificate. And the service binding will check the SPN in the authentication message to protect against NTLM relay attack. Some individual services, like MSRPC services, also have their own protection on relay attacks. When I show you the specific exploits, I will bring you these protections again. So, why we choose Exchange Server as the research target? Exchange Server is the most famous enterprise mail solution. It contains numerous of sensitive information about enterprise. So it's a high-value target for attackers. And Exchange is highly integrated with Active Directory. It supports Active Directory authentication methods like NTLM and Kerberos. It also has some high-privileged users and groups in the Active Directory. So once we can compromise these users or groups, we can do a lot of things. Let's take a look at the Exchange architecture. If you have analyzed some history bugs of Exchange, I think you are already very familiar with this architecture. The special point of this architecture is there are two websites on Exchange server. One is the default website. It's also called the front end, and The other is the Exchange backend. Email clients will connect and authenticate to the front end when they want to access emails. And the front end is actually a stateless service. It works like a proxy. It will forward all mail access requests to the backend. Finally, all processing for the mailbox happens in the backend. If we capture the network traffic between the front end and the backend, we will find the front end proxy use the Exchange machine account and the local system account to communicate with the backend. So we can find that the machine account is an account used for communication between Exchange internal services. It may have very high privileges. The mail clients are directly authenticated to the front end, but the mail operations finally happens in the backend. How does the front end and the backend synchronize user identities? The answer is Common Access Token HTTP handler. If you analyze the proxy logon before, you must hear about this HTTP handler. The structure of the Common Access Token handler is very simple. As shown in the right picture, it contains the username, user IDs, group IDs of the logon user. The backend will use the Common Access Token handler sent by the front end to create a new user token. Before the backend creates a user token with the Common Access Token handler, it will check if current user has token serialization rights on Exchange server. This can prevent any user from sending a Common Access Token handler to the backend to impersonate other users to log in. When the check is passed, the backend will create a new token to access the mail functions. The token serialization right is an Active Directory extended right. As the picture shows, the members of Exchange servers group have this right on the Exchange server. Exchange machine account will be added to the Exchange servers group when you're installing Exchange servers. This means Exchange machine accounts have this right. Compared with the Exchange standalone architecture, Exchange clusters are more common in enterprise environments, which is mainly for high availability. As we talked about before, the front end is a stateless service. All processing for the mailbox will happen in the backend service. This design provides good support for cluster architecture. The front end can forward client requests to a backend even running on other Exchange servers. You can find out which front end and which backend the request was processed in the HTTP response handler. Exchange machine account will also be used when the front end authenticates to the backend in different Exchange servers. And because all Exchange machine accounts are in the same groups and have same privilege on all Exchange servers, the Exchange can access the backend of other Exchange servers like the backend of himself. We already know we can coerce the remote machine account to authenticate to us, and the Exchange machine account have high privileges. So the basic idea is that once an attacker compromised a normal domain user, he can coerce Exchange machine account to send NTLM authentication message and relay the NTLM authentication message to another Exchange server. Finally gets the Exchange machine account privileges on the other Exchange server. So maybe this attacker can work. Exchange has many endpoints that support various functions and protocols. If we take some of these endpoints that support mail access, we may be able to manipulate any user's emails. If we can attack endpoints with management functions, maybe we may be able to do more harmful things like RCE. We can see that most Exchange front-end endpoints support NTLM authentication. Even the OWA, most people may think it only supports form authentication in the web browser. It still has NTLM authentication support. And the extended protection for authentication is disabled on all front-end endpoints by default. Even it can be enabled manually, the enterprise IT administrators usually do not enable it because it's not countable well with 7-layer load balancer by default, and enable it may also break email clients, which is not supported EPA. We know that the front end will forward client request to the backend, and the backend will create a new user token with the common access token handler. So can we relay NTLM messages of exchange machine accounts to the front end and add the forged common access token handler in the request handler to impersonate other users? The answer is no. There's a protection for the common access token handler in the front end. The front end will check the HTTP handler sent by the client, and the common access token handler is not allowed to be forwarded to the backend. And the front-end proxy will create a new common access token handler with current user's identity. So can we impersonate other users without common access token? The EWS endpoint is a well-known exchange endpoint. It's mainly used by Outlook for macOS by default. It supports full ability SOAP API for accessing and manipulating emails. One important function it provides is to impersonate other users with token serialization. The EWS token serialization, the EWS supports token serialization natively. As shown in the on the right picture, you can find this is the official EWS document in the MSDN. EWS supports client request with serialized security context. So it will be handled like this. Serialized security context is originally used by server-to-server authentication for token serialization. The backend EWS will read the serialized security context from the SOAP handler in client request. And then the EWS will create a new user token with a user SID and group SIDs in the serialized security context. Of course, it will check whether the client user has token serialization rights before creating a user token. So users with token serialization rights can impersonate other exchange users on the EWS endpoint, even without as common as a token handler. The whole attack process is like this. The attacker can call exchange 1, authenticate him, and relay the NTLM authentication message to the front-end EWS endpoint in the exchange 2. Then the attacker can operate on the EWS endpoint of exchange 2 as the exchange 1 machine account. Because exchange 1 have token serialization rights on the exchange 2, the attacker can add a serialized security context SOAP handler in his request to impersonate the victim user on the EWS endpoint of exchange 2. And finally, the attacker can perform any mail operations as the victim, like read emails and download attachments. Let's see a demo of the attack. The attacker perform NTLM Relay attack. When the attack is success, the attacker will get an exchange machine account's identity. Then the attacker can impersonate other users with their SIDs. For example, to impersonate the administrator with his SID. And you can see the attacker can finally read the administrator's emails. Let's take a look at the patch. When I submitted this vulnerability report, I suggested Microsoft should enable extended protection on the front end to fix it. But I found that Microsoft didn't follow my suggestion. The patch for this vulnerability is quite simple. it's a not common behavior for the machine account to log into the front end, so the patch just adds a check to prevent machine account logs into the front end. But when I analyzed the patch, I noticed that this security update also introduced a piece of code, which is located in the same function as the patch. The function name is add protocol specific headers to a server request. The newly introduced code is in the if branch, and the patch is in the else branch. As you can see in the if branch, it will read common access token from the client request directly, then deserialize it, and check if the identity in the common access token is a machine account. If the user in the common access token is not a machine account, the common access token handler from the client request will be directly added to the server request. To remember the protection for the common access token handler in the front end we just talked about. The protection is in the should copy handler to server request function. It doesn't allow common access token in the client request to be forwarded to the backend, but the add protocol specific handlers to the server request function is called after this function. The should copy handler to server request function removes the common access token handler from the server request, but the add protocol specific handlers to server request function adds this handler back, so the attacker can forge any mailbox user's common access token. Then the front end will forward it directly to the backend, therefore bypassing the patch. So the patch fixed the previous vulnerability, but bring us a new and more powerful vulnerability. Why I said it's more powerful? Because as for the previous vulnerability, not all endpoints can support token serialization without common access token handler. But this vulnerability allow forwarding the common access token in the client request to the backend directly. This will affect all front-end endpoints which support NTLM authentication. The attacker can impersonate any users on the front-end endpoints with the forged common access token. All endpoints that support NTLM authentication and support mail access can be exploited. The exploits are very simple for most endpoints. What you need to do is implement different protocols this endpoint supports and add a victim's common access token handler in the HTTP request to operate the victim's mailbox. Because there are too many protocols involved, I can't detail them one by one. Only some key points are given here. The RPC endpoint is a special one among these endpoints. For the RPC endpoints, there are more things you need to take into consider when developing exploits. The protocol used by the RPC endpoint is MAPI over MSRPC over HTTPS, which is the most complicated among all these endpoints of exchange. The RPC endpoint actually is not a part of exchange. It's a part of service called RPC proxy. It's an intermediate forwarding server between RPC clients and RPC servers on Exchange server. When communicating with RPC endpoints, the client needs to establish two HTTPS connections with the server. One is called RPC in data to send RPC requests. The other is RPC out data to receive RPC response. Both of them need authentication. The data inside the HTTPS is raw MSRPC package. The RPC proxy will forward the RPC package in the HTTP to the RPC server in the exchange. And the mail protocol MAPI is carried by the MSRPC to perform mail operations. But we all know MSRPC also needs authentication in general. And the RPC server may require the RPC package to be encrypted or signed, which will prevent NTLM Relay attacks. But for Exchange RPC endpoint, the RPC proxy allows clients to skip its authentication on RPC level to get a faster connection. This allows the attacker to set RPC authentication type to RPC C or none and RPC auth level to RPC auth level none, which means no authentication is required and there will be no packet encryption and signing. So we just need to trigger NTLM Relay once and log into both RPC in data and RPC out data as exchange machine accounts, and then skip RPC authentication to prevent signing and stalling on the RPC level. Eventually, the RPC relay, the NTLM relay will succeed, and we can impersonate arbitrary exchange user on the RPC endpoint and read their emails with MAPI protocol. Here, I give a table to show which endpoints are affected by this vulnerability and which endpoints can be exploited. All front-end endpoints that support NTLM authentication and support email access can be exploited. We can see these endpoints include AWS MVR, Reset API, OWA, ActiveSync, RPC. All of this can be exploited to take over any user's mailbox to read their emails, download their attachments, etc. Here I give a demo to show how to take over other users' mailbox with NTLM Relay to the OWA endpoint. I use the administrator user as the victim. The attacker first leaks the administrator's SID and creates a common access token with his SID. And then perform NTLM relay attack to the OWA integrated endpoint, and finally read the administrator's email content. If you want to see more demos about other endpoints, you can check out this YouTube link after the talk. Due to the time limitation, I will not demonstrate here one by one. In previous sections, we discussed how to take over arbitrary exchange mailbox with NTLM relay to the frontend. Next, we will discuss how to expand the attack surface and make more serious impact, such as remote code execution. Exchange backend endpoints are hosted on port 81 and port 444. Their main function is to handle requests from the frontend, but the default firewall policy of Exchange does prohibit external IP from accessing this backend port. Therefore, we can ignore the frontend communication. We can ignore the frontend and communicate directly with the backend. Because the previous patch was on the frontend, we can bypass the patch again. EPA is also disabled by default on backend endpoints, but even if you want to enable it, you can't turn it on, because if enabled, it will break the communication between the frontend and the backend, as shown in the error log on the right picture. The EPA protection requires a channel binding token in the authentication message sent by the client. If there is no channel binding token, the authentication will fail. If we check out how the front end generates covers authentication messages in the code level, we can find out that no channel binding token will be generated when the front end sends a covers AP request to the backend. So you can't enable the EPA protection on backend endpoints, because the EPA is not supported in the code level by design. So you can see the EPA was not taken into consideration when Microsoft designed their Exchange architecture. We can also confirm this by capturing the authentication traffic between the front end and the back end. So we can ignore the front end and perform NTLM relay attacks to the back end directly, and impersonate arbitrary exchange user with common access token. For most endpoints, the exploits are similar to the front end exploits, which are to the front end exploits. What you need to do is just to change the target port 2404. Here's a table to show which backend endpoints are exploitable. We can access more functions on the backend than the frontend. Most of them can result in arbitrary mailbox takeover. Some of these endpoints, like PowerShell and ECP in the backend, can even lead to remote code execution. So let's talk about the remote code execution. The frontend, ECP and PowerShell don't support NTLM authentication, while all backend endpoints support NTLM authentication, including ECP and PowerShell. These two endpoints are mainly for exchange management and provide many powerful functions. We can use them to RCE. A PowerShell endpoint is the most powerful backend endpoint. By relaying NTLM authentication message of exchange machine account to the backend PowerShell endpoint, we can impersonate any user on PowerShell endpoint, including exchange admins. As a result, we can get access to all exchange PowerShell commandlets. Exchange PowerShell doesn't support to execute Windows commands like the native PowerShell of Windows. It only supports executing commandlets implemented by the exchange. So how can we abuse it for RCE? The first method is that we need to find a post-OS RCE on the exchange PowerShell commandlet. There has been many such vulnerabilities in history. So perhaps finding one is not difficult. But let's think out of the box. Don't limit our thinking to ASP.NET bugs. There's a better way to achieve RCE without finding new vulnerabilities. The Exchange PowerShell supports many commandlets for role-based access control management. One of them caught my attention is as-role group member. Exchange admins can use it to add members to exchange role groups. Organization management is one of these role groups, and is also organization management is one of these role groups. It's also in the local administrator groups of Exchange servers, which means we can add low privilege domain users, for example, the attacker himself, to organization management, and escalate to local administrators privileges on Exchange servers. Once we have local administrator privilege on Exchange servers, is easy to achieve RCE. There are lots of well-known lateral movement methods like WMI-ESEC, PSECC, WinRM can help you to execute commands remotely on the target Exchange server. Let's see the demo. Before the relay attack, the attacker doesn't have privileges to execute commands on Exchange servers. Then the attacker performs an relay attack to the backend PowerShell endpoint to impersonate the administrator and add himself to the organization management group. Now the attacker has been added to the organization management group. And finally, the attacker can execute any commands on the Exchange server with PSECC with system privileges. Okay. We can also achieve RC with backend ECP. ECP supports two methods to impersonate other users. We can use any of them to impersonate victims. But there's a HTTP handler called VDL project ID is needed when send the request to the backend ECP. The ID is the frontend's ECP virtual directory GUID. The ID cannot read by normal domain users. Will only configuration role can read it with the get ECP virtual directory commandlet. So the view only configuration role is needed to access the backend ECP. Like the push endpoint, the ECP also supports chat users to organization management group. So the attacker with view only configuration role can impersonate administrator on the backend ECP and add himself to organization management and achieve RC on Exchange servers. If you want to see more demos about how to attack the backend endpoints, you can check out this YouTube link after the talk. There are too much demos. I will not demonstrate here one by one. The final patch for this vulnerabilities is the extended protection. The patch has been in development for over 1 year since I submitted the first vulnerability on this attack surface. Because the patch not only affects Exchange server but also may break a mail client application like Outlook. It's indeed complicated, and many factors need to be considered in the development. The good news is the patch has been finally released in August 2022. This patch mainly protects the HTTPS connection with the channel binding token. After the patch, Exchange is finally having the ability to defend NTLM Relay attacks. The patch will not be enabled automatically when you update your Exchange server. You'll need to enable it manually. Microsoft also provides a PowerShell script to help you enable the patch on all your Exchange servers with the recommend settings. The extended protection is mainly protecting the HTTPS connections. You may ask, how about HTTP? There's no channel binding token for HTTP because the channel binding token is calculated with the HTTPS certificate. Most Exchange endpoints only have HTTPS support by default, but the front-end RCP endpoint is an exception. The RCP endpoint has SSL offloading enabled by default, which means it also supports HTTP protocol. So the extended protection doesn't protect the HTTP transport of the front-end RPC endpoint. Until relay to the front-end RPC on HTTP can also lead to arbitrary mailbox takeover. I also report the HTTP relay issue to MSRC, and this issue was also fixed in the August patch by disable SSL uploading when enable the extended protection. Is there any possible patch to bypass this patch? When I'm looking at the documentation for the extended protection, I found that the active discover is still not protected by the extended protection. In most cases, this seems to be a security issue because the auto-discovery endpoints do not provide any high-risk functions. But if you can find the SSL vulnerability in the auto-discovery endpoints to proceed requests to other endpoints, just like proceed not shell, this attack service will still work. Does the Exchange machine accounts have any other high privileges? The answer is yes. All members of Exchange trusted subsystem have local administrator privileges on all Exchange servers, and all Exchange machine accounts will be added to this group during Exchange server installation. So Exchange machine accounts have local administrator privileges on all Exchange servers in the same Active Directory. So how can we build these powerful privileges? The NTLM Relay is back again. Perhaps the first service come to your mind is SMB, but unfortunately, SMB signing is enabled in Exchange server by default. There are also some other Windows services can be used for lateral movement, like OneArm and MS-RPC over TCP. The OneArm is also unreliable. MS-RPC over TCP is a good attacked target because there are many RPC interfaces enabled on Windows, and each RPC interface implements its own security policies. RPC clients can set their auth type to RPC authn1nt to use NTLM SSP. MS-RPC provides multiple levels of authentication. RPC will decide whether to encrypt and sign the traffic according to the different authentication level. If the integrity or the privacy authentication level is set in the RPC connection, the RPC package will be signed or encrypted, which means the NTLM Relay attack won't work. The RPC authn level authentication level indicates that the RPC connection doesn't need to be encrypted and signed. DEFCON is also based on MS-RPC. It uses MS-RPC as its underlying communication protocol. The signing and sorting are not first enabled on DEFCON servers, which means the authentication level of an RPC connection can be completely determined by the DEFCON client. So attackers can set the RPC authn level to RPC auth level connect to avoid encrypting and signing, and relay NTLM to DEFCON. For DEFCON communications, if you want to access the common direct, you need to perform twice authentication. One is authenticate to the 135 ports, which is the endpoint mapper service, and the second is to authenticate to the dynamic port assigned by the endpoint mapper. Because we can cause the target machine to authenticate, we can trigger as many authentications as we want. MVC20 application is a well-known DEFCON project that can be abused to perform lateral movements if you have local administrator privileges. It provides a execution shell command API to execute any commands remotely. So let's chain them together. We can call exchange $1 to authenticate to us and relay the NTLM authentication to the DEFCON service in exchange 2. Since the exchange $1 has local administrator privilege on the exchange 2, we can get the ability to call MVC20 application the execute shell command API to execute any command on the exchange 2. Let's see a demo. There are two exchange servers, and there are no calculators process running on them now. There are no calculator process now. And after the relay attack, the attacker can pop calculators process with exchange machine con. The patch for this vulnerability has also gone through a very long process. The initial patch for this vulnerability was released at the patch Tuesday in June 2021, but it's not enabled by default. Customers need to manually enable it. Until March 2023, more than 1 year later, the patch is finally enabled by default, with no ability to disable it. Your DEFCON server is finally unexploitable. Now we already have Exchange RCE. Is there a way to escalate our privilege to the domain admin? There's a famous privilege escalation method called privilege exchange. It builds the right DSCL rights on the domain object. An attacker can build this right to grant himself DC sync rights to dump hashes of any domain users. The privilege exchange can also be chained with the NTLM Relay from HITB to LDAP. But this method has been fixed in 2019. Next, let's introduce a new one. Once an attacker achieves RCE on Exchange servers, he can also get the privilege of Exchange Trusted Subsystem Group and Exchange Windows Permissions Group. The Exchange Windows Permissions Group has privilege to create new OU in the Active Directory. So the attacker can also create a new OU and take full control of this OU. Exchange Trusted Subsystem Group has right distinguished name, right name and right name rights on all domain users and domain computers, except whose admin count set to 1. These two right name privileges are two different privileges. It's not a table here. And the Exchange Windows Permission Group can delete user and computer objects and create new user and computer objects in the newly created OU. With this privilege, the attacker can move arbitrary users and computer objects to the OU he controlled. Also, we can abuse these privileges to escalate to domain admin. The attacker can create a new OU called evil OU, and then he will have full control of this OU. He can set any access control entries on this OU, and he can also move other users and computers to this OU. There's a special feature of OU is that if the access control entry on the OU is set need to be inherited, the objects in the OU will inherit the access control entry. If the attacker sets a generic all on the evil OU and sets the inheritance type to all, the generic all will inherit down to all the child objects and affect all domain users and computers in this OU. And the attacker can get generic all rights on all domain users and domain controllers in this OU. The attacker can then take over this user and computer objects with shared credentials or a resource-based concentrated delegation attack. Domain controller computers don't set admin counts by default. So we can use this method to take over domain controller computer object. And we can then achieve RCE on domain controllers with RBCD attack or shared credentials attack. Let's see the demo. Suppose the attacker already achieved RCE on Exchange server and add himself to the Exchange Trusted Subsystem Groups. Now the attacker is in the Exchange Trusted Subsystem Groups. The attacker can create a normal machine account, which is used for the RBCD attack, and the attackers doesn't have write privileges on their domain controllers now. The write permission will fail. The write operation will fail. Then the attacker tries to escalate his privileges. He firstly creates a evil OU and set generic all with inheritance in the OU, and then move the DC domain controller to the evil OU. After the attacker moves the domain controller to the OU, the domain controller will inherit the generic role set on the OU. And the attacker can gain generic role rights on this domain controller. Then the attacker can write the property used by the RBCD attack on the domain controller now. Finally, the attacker can impersonate domain admin with corpus delegation to execute command on the domain controller. The attack path we just talked about has a limitation, which is the RBCD attack require the target domain must have at least one DC running at least Windows 2012. There is another way to achieve RC on domain controllers without any limitations. The Exchange Windows Permissions group can add members to the group policy create owners, and this group has privilege to create new GPO group policy objects in the Active Directory. Then the attacker can create an evil GPO and apply it to the evil OU. So the attacker can create an evil GPO and create a GP link from the evil OU to the evil GPO. The group policy set on the evil GPO will apply to the evil OU. The attacker can create computer or user immediate tasks on the evil GPU. When the group policy updates on the victim's computers, the commands in the immediate tasks will be executed on the computer as system or the logon user. This depends on the type of immediate tasks you created. This privilege escalation can also combine with the NTLM Relay attack, but it needs another vulnerability to trigger NTLM authentication of Exchange machine account over HTTP or HTTPS, just like what the previous Exchange did. If you have found such a vulnerability, you can relay NTLM from HTTP to LDAP and add the attacker to these high privilege groups, and the attacker can then perform privilege escalation attack we just talked about, and gain domain privileges in the Active Directory. I have reported this vulnerability to Microsoft, and they said this vulnerability will not be fixed. So you need to mitigate it yourself. Here's a suggestion. You can switch your Exchange server to Active Directory split permission model. This model effectively limits the privileges of Exchange in the Active Directory, which will break the exploit chain. The final part, conclusions and takeaways. In this talk, we discussed the NTLM Relay attack surface in Exchange server cluster. We also discussed the new privilege escalation methods from Exchange to domain admin that still work up to now and won't be fixed in the future. Finally, there are some suggestions to mitigate these attacks. First, you need to enable extended protection to mitigate the NTLM Relay attack and keep your Exchange server and the Windows server they are running on up to date to avoid attack surface bring by the Windows services. Finally, you need to apply Active Directory split permission model to mitigate the privilege escalation model. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for the interesting talk. Now we're going to go over to the Q&A. Are there any questions from the audience? Yep. Okay, one.
About the last attack path, if we already compromise Exchange, can we just do the DC sync why we need another approach to get create a new OU like this?
Because the distinct permissions has been removed in the latest exchange server.
Oh, I got it. So
this has been this thing privilege has been fixed in the about 2019.
Oh, got it. So and the second question is about the split permission model. So after the split permission model, does it impact or can we just do we need any new CR to apply the split permission model? Because this kind of will remove a lot of permission.
Yeah, the split permission model will may break many things. As the Microsoft suggestions, the split permission model may be enabled in an installation. When you install your Exchange server, if you have installed your Exchange server, I think it's hard to enable this model. Maybe you need to manually to delete this high risk permissions yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Nope. Okay, I think that concludes the talk. One more round of applause for James.